Welcome back to this week's Market Update by me, T, your neighborhood realtor. This week we will be discussing the sustainability of rising home prices and why we are not in another housing bubble. So as you see on this slide, the question is, are rising home prices sustainable or will we see another crash? Realtor.com came out with a study asking, are you worried about a housing bubble that may be persistent in the market? On this graph, 77% of consumers said yes. 3 out of 4 said yes. Almost 1 out of 2 agents said yes. Now, this is a percentage of people who believe there is a housing bubble where they live. And as we see here on the appreciation forecast, it is near 10% in 2022. So according to CoreLogic, appreciation forecast near 10% in 2022. And looking back to 2020, we ended around 6%. In 2020, there was approximately 10% appreciation year over year. In 2021, the full year appreciation was about 15%, and this year is forecasted to be almost 10% appreciation. So going back to the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the average appreciation was 3.8%. And then back in 2020 and 2021, going into 2022, we began to see a lot more appreciation than average. So price appreciation is starting to tick up. Price appreciation ticked up in December about 18.5% year over year. And as I just mentioned in the beginning, CoreLogic stated that in 2021's homes appreciated by 15%. Now, many of you may be asking, why do we see appreciation in December at 18.5%? We weren't at 18% appreciation the entire year. We started off in January year over year at 10% appreciation. So when you look at it, it brings that average slightly lower. Now the home forecast for 2022. So if we start to look forward to what forecasters are looking at regarding prices, the average is a little over 6%. Everyone from CoreLogic at the high side is about 9.6%. Zelman's at 3%, and everywhere in between. Right now, as we start to look at forecasters, what we realize is that they have a bias towards the upside. Now, what does that mean? That means that they think it's going to be a bit higher. So back in January, when I talked about forecasters, where we were about 5.1%, now we're about 6.1%, likely to see those numbers revive upwards. No doubt we saw a great jobs report come out. The economy is improving, and we expect to see mortgage rates continue to uptick. And the economy is showing that home prices are appreciating. So when we think about pricing, it's a matter of supply and demand. So a very good question to ask yourself today is, where is the supply? Where is the demand? And that's what this slide shows us here. It's a matter of supply and demand. So if we look nationally at new listings going into the end of the year, they're falling like a rocket. New listings being generated are starting to fall off at the end of the year. Well, you ask, what does this mean? Well, it means anytime we start to see a supply drop, it's going to keep the upward pressure on prices, just like active listings are starting to drop. So we see our active listings here. Now, the virus slowed down sellers, but not buyers. It means we have more demand, a little less supply. So if we look at the supply side of things across the country, active listings are dropping, new listings are dropping. We are in a seller's market, meaning homes will appreciate when there is less supply on the market. In this slide, it talks about the impact of inventory on home prices. Many say that when they see what's happening, they are worried about a crash. However, there is no evidence of a crash. This market is a little bit different than 2008. And I want to paint a little picture of the supply side of our business compared to 2008. Now, in this slide, it talks about the inventory of homes is nothing like last time around. So if you take 2007, 2008, 2009, and 2010, those 4 years of the housing crash starting and happening, almost 10 months of supply in the first 2 years. Then moving forward, we went down to 7 or 8 months of supply. The question for today is, where are we at right now? So we started off in 2018 and 2019 with 3 months of supply. So the last couple of years in December, we were at just under 2 months of supply. Nothing like what we saw back then in 2008. So for there to be a shift in pricing, or for prices not to be rising at the pace they are now, one of two things must happen. One, you have to have a dramatic increase in supply, or demand must squelch. So my question to those of you are watching is, where is your market? Do you see a reason that there's going to be an influx of properties for sale? Or do you see a reason that demand will go down? We want to look at what's happening nationally and what's happening locally with inventory. So where are we at now? What do we think is going to happen in the coming months? At the end of the day, that is what it all boils down to. So this brings me to our next topic, which is buyer demand. Now, we have a we have little supply, but a lot of demand. So we can all agree that the demand is high. And with such a hot market, we see existing home sales hit a 15-year record. So existing home sales in 2019, 2020, and 2021. As we see, we sold more existing homes in 2021 than the last couple of years, and a 15-year high in existing home sales. So two things are true. We have a lack of inventory, and we are selling more homes than ever. We are selling a ton of homes, and for buyers in this market, it's all about positioning. So we also know that people who are buying today can afford the homes. So looking at this graph, it consists of loans that are given to people with less than a 620 credit score. There is nothing like the last time. This is nothing like the last time at all. This comes from the Federal Reserve going back to 2003, 2004, and 2005. The time leading up to 2008 crisis. Many loans were given to people that couldn't afford it or qualify for it. So what has dramatically shifted today is the equity position of homeowners all across the country. What I mean is that it's greater today than it's been in quite some time. So looking at the dynamics, they don't support a crash. They support a market that is low in inventory with a tremendous amount of demand. That's what's pushing prices, not inflation. So no loans are given to people who can't afford to qualify for it. So this market is nothing like what we saw in the housing crisis. Next week, we will be continuing on the topic as well. It covers affordability, equity, and foreclosures, among other things. So just a reminder for my sellers out there, home appreciation, it means more equity. So that will wrap it up for this week's market update. As I always say, my goal is to help you create wealth and purpose in this thing we call life.